So I have been thinking about climate and climate change and climate engineering and climate art, light and objects, and about how we might reimagine our relationship to the sky, not just as sort of this thing we look up to, but as something that we can actively shape. And the idea that I'm toying around with, I want to talk about today, I call it PRISMATHEON. PRISMATHEON. It's science, it's art, it's aesthetics, it's poetry, it's planetary art, planetary poetry. And I think it has the potential to help with climate change, but also create something that's exquisitely beautiful. So let's start with the big question: just uh, why do this? Why mess with the sky? Well, the planet is heating, the planet is changing, and our time frame to impact it is narrowing, right? We know that reducing emissions is critical, but even if we were to cut them to zero tomorrow, the damage is already in motion, and it means we're looking at rising temperatures, extreme weather, ecosystem collapse. So scientists have been exploring ways to cool things down, and those strategies fall under the term geo-engineering. And one of the big ones is something called solar radiation management, or SRM. The basic idea is that if we reflect a little bit of the sun's energy back into space, we could lower temperatures just enough to buy time for deeper climate solutions. Now, most of the common SRM proposals are injecting sulfate aerosols into the atmosphere, which is inspired by what happens when a volcano erupts, right? A big eruption sends particles up that reflect sunlight and temporarily cool the atmosphere. So conceptually, that sounds very promising, but there are big problems. And sulfates degrade the ozone layer, and they can actually shift weather patterns themselves. They can disrupt monsoons, they can cause droughts in some places while cooling in others. So there's all kinds of practical and ethical issues you have to deal with there. And then the thing is that once you start, you cannot stop. You could not suddenly remove the aerosols from the atmosphere without rapidly spiking in a phenomenon that is ominously called termination shock. Sounds a lot like withdrawal detox, right, from our body. So it got me thinking, what if there were a better way, a way to reflect sunlight that was more precise, more adaptable, and reversible? So here's the idea, right? Instead of sulfate aerosols, we use microscopic prismatic mirrors, engineered particles, nano-engineered, that refract and redirect sunlight in a controlled way. Think of them like tiny floating prisms, like I have hanging in my windows here. Often on these videos you can see, in fact, right there is the result of a prism in my window at this time of day, at this time of year. Tiny floating prisms suspended in the upper atmosphere. And unlike sulfates, which scatter the light randomly, these could be designed to selectively filter and redirect certain wavelengths. So instead of just dimming the sun, we could actually sculpt the light, reducing harmful infrared heat while keeping the natural balance of visible light. And here's the part that I think is interesting aesthetically, philosophically, and ultimately in our humanity. What if we could control that? And to imagine a network of ground-based lasers that interact with these particles, tuning them in real time. So we adjust the cooling effect as needed, focusing on specific regions, changing over time as needed, and even creating massive ephemeral light displays in the sky, right? Like an artificial aurora, but shaped by our hands. It wouldn't just be about climate control, it would be creating something that means something. As I'm reading this and saying this, I'm thinking, what if you were to combine it with like a planetary theremin, an organ of some kind, that you have bells and sounds that are actually tuned in to the lasers as it interacts with the particles in the sky, right? It would be a new way to experience the atmosphere and our place on the Earth as a dialogue. Not just passive observers, but co-creators. All other parts of the Earth have been impacted by our gardening capabilities, our desire to change the landscape, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. This would be an opportunity to simply extend that natural part of our human stewardship. Now, let's pause for a second, because there's a deeper layer to all of this. For thousands of years, tens of thousands, since language began, probably hundreds of thousands of years, humans have looked at the sky as something sacred. In almost every culture, the heavens have been the realm of gods and spirits and visions. But in the modern world, we've come to think of it mechanically, just as a layer of gases, a staging ground for satellites, for weather reports, for military uses. What PRISMATHEON suggests, whether or not we can ever actually build it, is that we can reclaim the sky as a canvas for our deepest aspirations. I've been really inspired by artists and thinkers who have played with this idea before. The MIT Center for Advanced Visual Studies, where they built Centerbeam, this massive collaboration of light and laser art trying to integrate human experience with technology. My friend and my mentor, Lowry Burgess, sent art into space not as a statement but as an offering. What would it mean to create a planetary-scale artwork? Not in a gallery, not on a screen, not in some virtual reality headset, but in the actual fabric of the atmosphere. All right, let's bring this back down. Could this actually work? Scientifically? Technologically? Yes. The physics of reflective particles in the atmosphere is well understood. The challenge is in the engineering, making mirrors that are small enough and stable enough, able to be controlled in a way that wouldn't cause unintended harm. But I know that the technology of nano-engineering is available to create something this precise, this elegant. What about ethics? Well, that's a big question, and one that I don't have answers to now, but as we develop this, we can make sure that they are considered. Any large-scale geoengineering project contains risks, even if it is reversible, like the PRISMATHEON. Who gets to decide how it's used? Who's in control? If it were built, how would it be tested? What about the global collaboration? What kind of institutional networks? What kind of oversight? What kind of reflection? In some ways, these questions are as important as the technology, because these are the questions that bring our combined human experience together, setting aside the baggage of nationalism or corporatism of profits or the things that tend to drive our larger decisions today. This shifts that onus, this shifts that burden, this shifts that focus so that we can be asking questions derived from a broader view of humanity. It's absolutely worth exploring. The way we think about the climate right now, the way we think about our place on the planet is not enough. We need solutions that are practical and they are poetic. We need solutions that are scientific and sacred. So why am I talking about this? Well, I think we are at a moment in history where we have to rethink everything, not just how we solve problems, but how we live with the world. If we're going to intervene in the planet's systems anyway, shouldn't we do it to add meaning, not just utility? I don't know if PRISMATHEON will ever happen, but I do know that how we imagine the future matters. I do know that the stories we tell shape the actions that we take as a society, as a culture. Maybe, just maybe, if we dream of a world where science and beauty work together, where the sky itself can become a shared creation, we can find new ways to not just survive, but to truly live, to embrace the sacred, to cultivate the scientific within the broader concept of what it is to be human. So, let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think this is something you would support? Would you have any ideas about how to make it more precise? Is it something we shouldn't be thinking about? Is geoengineering something that just because we could do it, that maybe we shouldn't? Do we have a responsibility to shape our planet with as much care as we would spend on writing a piece of music, a song, or a symphony? Anyway, keep your wits about you.